All right.
I need the grid.
We try to talk to you.
Hello.
Hi, Gilbert.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we're going to get started. Welcome to CMC's Sunday Dharma Talk. Today's talk is The Heart of Chan, exploring mind via Mahaprajna given by Gilbert. This is his second lecture of the series. There will be 2 more lectures the next following Sundays, same time. So we will first recite the 3 refuges and the 4 great vows along with Gilbert. Everyone, please join palm and bow.
All right. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless fixations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Amitabha. Good morning to you all. As kind of what happens with me a lot of times is I switch gears, oftentimes maybe 3 or 4 times before I actually start a lecture, because sometimes it's very, very difficult for us to in terms of presenting the material, to present what is this material that I'm going to present. I only have an hour to present it, and there's so much here that how do I do this? And it's difficult because I can present it in a historical way or a doctrinal way, but this is Chan, this is experience. And in the experience, what is most important is the idea that we are practitioners. This is critical in terms of how we approach this. And as I've been studying for the preparation of this class, I go over many materials, some of them from historians, some of them from Buddhist scholars. And you can tell if the people have an understanding of what they're writing about, or they're just simply historians interpreting something that are there. For instance, if there was a Holocaust and 2,000 years from now, they unearth different places, they may say that the people, they worshiped at these places as evidenced by these golden arches, and that these golden arches were somewhere the people would go all the time to, and they worshiped a person by the name of Ronald McDonald, because that's all that was left there in the society. They saw it and they interpreted it, and in this way they try to fathom what happened historically. Here we're trying to fathom what happened historically from the viewpoint of that this was 2,500 years ago, before recordings, and we're trying to figure that out. And we've got people that are bringing the Buddha's words orally and keeping them there, and then they are put down into words. We have the term called Buddha Vakana, and Buddha Vakana is one saying it was the words of the Buddha. And this is very regularly used to say, oh, that wasn't the words of the Buddha. And it may not have been the words of the Buddha, but it may have been the intention of the Buddha. And I think that this is what's important. So scholars and people who want to hold on to a very limited, narrow part of history say, anything outside of this is not Buddha Vakana. And so we can't look at it and say, well, did the Buddha did he speak the words that are in the Mahayana sutras? Was that all made up? And it's very interesting because it's not something that's very easy, but what happens is that we in part transcend the idea of what's called historicity into another whole aspect, and that aspect is dhyana, the practice. Chan, dhyana, Zen, dhyana. All of those things mean that we're practicing. And so it's something that historians can say, well, this didn't really happen. No, a serpent didn't come when he was born and shade him, in the forest or whatever. These things we have to take from a faith aspect, and we have to take it also from those who have some form of experiences or realizations, in terms of what's there. And it transcends the idea of these written words, which is what Chan is beyond words and phrases. And we try to look at this in this way. What how I started for today was to go to the very end, to go to the last teachings, which is the teachings of the Tathagata Garbha. And the Tathagata Garbha is the idea of where they say Rulai thus come one, that, but the Garbha aspect is the Buddha womb. So how do we explain what the Buddha womb is? There's two explanations for it, and it's very interesting because depending on who you are, it is largely misinterpreted. And we allow scholars to try to interpret it for us. And as a result, they take the easy way because they cannot understand the other one. They could never understand that because that requires faith, it requires practice, it requires experience. This, what we talked about last week, the gnosis, this idea that there is something that is known deep down beyond words and phrases. So I wanted to explain to you this, and then perhaps from that, it might help you when we go back into time, what was happening, and so that you can see that this is a natural progression. So the Tathagata Garbha, one explanation is that we're all kind of little Buddhalets in the womb of the Buddha, and we're just waiting to come out. So I have this picture that we show, this is the Buddha, and that we want to become the Buddha. And so we are here, and we need the realization to be able to expand to become the Buddha. And in this way, we are little by little, like sometimes are referred to as effervescent bubbles that are bubbling up and poof, but those effervescent bubbles are fundamentally empty, sunyata. And so can we really all of a sudden, then one of these bubbles here that we have here escape and become a Buddha, another Buddha over here? And sorry for the quick drawing, but just to give you an example, can something come out and become a Buddha on this side? Would that be two Buddhas? Would that be two minds? But this is one example of what Tathagata Garbha means, is that there's these Buddhas waiting to happen. And if we practice in this way, we will not get there, because we'll be sitting there thinking that we are going to become a Buddha. But this is by and large accepted as one of the understandings by scholars and Buddhologists as what the meaning of the Buddha womb. But there's another way to do this. Hang on, I have to get to my next PowerPoint page here. This is a little bit larger because it's more Mahayana. Back a little bit here. And in this one, if I can get that right. Okay. In this one, it's the same thing, Tathagata Garbha. But what we have is very interesting. We have the Dharmakaya, which is the Buddha field, represented by this outer line with these rays going out, indicating that it's infinite. So this is the Buddha mind. How is it possible that we could be able to draw a picture of the Buddha mind? Because this line here, the circle, is that in fact not really there. It is just infinite. But I show you to do that so you can see in contrast what's there. This is the Dharmakaya, the infinite light of mind, limitless, infinite, timeless, yet within it, it holds all times from the past, present, and the future. Shifu used to always say the Buddha is in the present moment. The present moment is all times because we're not working on human time. So we go, oh, what time is it? Oh, I see. It's this time. We're not using that. What we're using is Buddha time. What's Buddha time? Infinite, accessible to everything that's there. It's within the womb of the Buddha, and everything that is going to come into appearances is within the womb of the Buddha. So this here, as depicted by this line here, is the Nirmanakaya. This is appearances, and the Buddha appears in a bodily state in the samsaric realm, but he cannot be known by this shape. This is only a shape that we can use to interpret things, so that that Buddha can communicate with sentient beings, which are all part of him or her, or it. It defies the idea of femininity, masculinity, or anything. It's just, we call it Buddha because we can't call it, because you wouldn't know what we're talking about. So here in the Nirmanakaya is the appearance, but also all the appearances that are there. It is this sentient mind that is also here, just like a flash of lightning in a summer cloud or a dewdrop on a leaf. It's something that is transient. We cannot build anything upon these appearances, and the Buddha could not be defined by the appearance of the Nirmanakaya, this body. Yet sentient beings, all phenomena is not separate from this. And in this Nirmanakaya, there's no borders, real borders there to the Dharmakaya. There's no real borders, only what we perceive as being these little flecks here, that we believe that there's borders or that there is a Buddha. So we create statues to represent that, but we should not hold on to that in some kind of a deification of the Buddha mind. When we do that, then essentially what we're doing is we're making, downgrading Buddha into a god, and it isn't in this way. It cannot be grasped at. So we have to eliminate this. And then all little specks that are there are Nirmanakaya. Just imagine like little morning stars appearing and then gone, appearing and gone, rising and falling, rising and falling. Okay, in terms of what's happening here. And the Nirmanakaya doesn't interfere with things that are good or bad that are arising. It just simply is a function of mind and how it works. So this function, when we begin to understand it, that is what we refer to as pratika samapada. Causes and conditions never fail, because in these causes and conditions, all of these things are appearing, but they're all interconnected. So So when we see that, how are they interconnected? What is the glue that holds them all together? Is the Buddha mind. But we say Buddha mind, but when I say Buddha mind, there's a new fleck that appears here. But it's beyond the Buddha mind. And in this, what I've represented by these little red stripes here is the reward body, because it's still within the Buddha, the Buddha realm, which is, there's no Buddha realm, okay? It is just Buddha without the name Buddha. And so, but this reward body is that which totally transcends the idea of samsara or any appearance of samsara, but it is something that nevertheless there are reflections of it. Sorry, because I can't explain this part within the Buddha mind. So it doesn't negate that there is some essence of the Buddha. It is that where we come to, that is the Buddha nature. The Buddha nature is something we can define and say, Buddha nature is this, Buddha nature is that. This is where Shakyamuni Buddha had trouble trying to explain what Buddha nature is, because you can't explain it. You have to feel it. You have to feel gone. This is gone, gone, until it comes. What comes? What's already been there. It is why we call thus come one or thus gone one, because when we say Tatha Agatha or Tatha Agatha, all of these thus come one or thus gone one, all are showing just simply mind. We cannot get there simply from words. One has to practice. This is Chan, the practice. We have to practice, but we have to practice with the right view to be able to understand that. Nothing that the Buddha said is inconsistent with this. Nothing here was essentially made up. It was interpreted. And there was a progression in terms of the understanding. But when we look at this and we see that, then we understand that this progression was there. Now, in the ancient texts, there are still, from the very beginning, the indicators of Mahayana and what we call the prototypical Mahayana practice. The one we mentioned last week was the Salistamba Sutra, and there's one called an Ajit Sutra. And all of these, and Ajit, I think they used Mahayana for the first time. And in that, what the emphasis was in that sutra was, let me get to it. This is the name of the sutra. So, Ajitasima. All the emphasis is on the perfection of the practice. So this perfection is what we call Mahaprajna Paramita. So from the very, very beginning, there was this practice, and this particular sutra was originated from an area what was called kind of Kashmir, which is more closer to Pakistan. And I'll show you in the map kind of the evolution of how Mahayana was created, where it was created. But if I just simply do that, I'll be like a travel guide, and I'm not getting to the essence of the practice. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that you have an essence of what we're doing. So this reward body is here. So if they talk about the Buddha was here and 100,000 bodhisattvas appeared or whatever it was, all of that is still represented by these red hash lines. It's all within the Buddha realm. One of the things that those all understand is that there's no difference. There's no difference. If they don't understand it, that is why the Buddha is presenting it to them and saying, don't be swayed by this, look at this and see this. But every once in a while, the Buddha would do a reveal beyond the listener's ability to manifest in their own sense. And so, for instance, in the Shurangama Sutra, he would hold up his webbed hand and emanate colors from it. And this is kind of, for the Buddha, a very, very cheap trick. But to somebody who hasn't seen it before, that's pretty inspiring. And what it does is it gives faith to what is there. So as we begin to look at it, then we see that the Nirmanakaya and then the Sambhogakaya, which is represented by the red lines, that's the reward body. And all within the Buddha field, which is the Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya is beyond human conception, beyond any conception whatsoever, because that there is just a direct gnosis or realization that it's there. In the beginning, such realizations are much smaller. But if we're looking at the human ability is like this, and all of a sudden one gets a realization that sees mind this way, it's much bigger. It gives you the faith that you understand that it's beyond words and phrases. There's something there in your heart. In your heart, you feel it. And when you feel it and experience that, you know it's totally different. And that is your interest, that you want to go to share it. Imagine Shakyamuni Buddha. He finishes under the Bodhi tree and he's walking, he's going, wow, what am I going to do? How am I going to explain this to anybody? This is really, wow. I can't give them this. I don't even have an idea how to give them this. All I know is that I have to for them to give them the foundation in which they can work on. And there's a very old Nikaya that was talked about the Buddha talking in the Jeta Grove, and a kind of a wise man in the back. You see him sometimes in the lectures and stuff, and they're kind of like, yes, maybe, no, I don't know. And they're in the back, like looking at you when you're lecturing like that. And they're just waiting for the question and answer time, or they'll come around afterwards. And this happens to me wherever I go. Somebody will want to say something. Sometimes if they have a big ego, they'll say it right in the class, and other times they'll wait until everybody's gone because they're not quite sure. Kind of a Shen Shu type of a person that holds on and writes it on the wall. So if he's wrong, nobody sees it. But they'll come up and they'll ask you about that. And so the Buddha had somebody come up and ask him a question like this, and said, I've noticed that you come here and you teach all the time. And yet I see some of the people, there's a benefit to them, and to others, there's no benefit. How do you explain that? If your teachings are so good, why doesn't everybody get the benefit from it? And so the Buddha said, where are you from, good man? And he says, oh, I'm from a small hamlet of such and such. He said the name. And the Buddha said, do you know how to get there? And he goes, of course. And the Buddha said, well, how do you get there? Well, you follow this path out of town. You go through the 2 valleys, and then you cross the mountain, and then there is a plain that's there, and that is my hometown. And the Buddha said, and if you wished yourself to be there right now, could you be there? And he says, of course not. I would have to travel the path. And the Buddha said, precisely. It is in this way. Dhyana, Chan, Zen, represent practice. It's all in the practice. One has to practice with the right view. And if they practice with the right view, then that's there. This is the heart of the Buddha as represented with the Prajnaparamita Sutras, in particular, the Heart Sutra, that enables one to be able to do that. And in the Heart Sutra, it's saying, no, there's nothing here. You say that this is real, but it's all empty. It's all devoid of any substance or existence. Nothing is there, including your examination of it, that nothing is there. Even that has to be abandoned. And then if that's there, then little by little, the Buddha, the self nature of the Buddha will be revealed. What is the self nature of the Buddha? Nagarjuna knew it. And they go, please, Nagarjuna, from the Madhyamika school. And he says, you say that there's these two truths, but what is it? And he just said, go find out for yourself. I'm just telling you that all of this here, all this scenery is not real. It's empty. Well, empty of what? You have to find out. What does this emptiness mean? And so many different schools are using this to try to advance. And even before we get to the Huayan school or Tiantai school, which were the Chinese response to this information coming in. There are so many schools, and I was trying to say, how am I going to be able to explain to you all the different schools? And I showed you last week the list of different subcategories of different ones, and each with a little bit of a different flavor, a different way of approaching it. But it's just as is said in the sutras, there's 84,000 obstructions and 84,000 Dharma doors. It is in the heart that is what makes the transition. This was the lesson of the Heart Sutra, and this Mahaprajnaparamita, Maha being the highest, and all of this is leading to, as we go through the Heart Sutra, and showing that there are a negation of the reality of things, which actually isn't really hard if one sat down and tried to support the appearance of anything. You try to support the appearance of time. Try to establish, oh, I see, it's this time. Try to say that. And exactly why? Because it's on a watch, because it's established by Greenwich Meridian time, for the whole world. And then exactly what time is it on Venus or Andromeda or 500 light years away? Do they run on that and they go, oh my gosh, it's time for CNN. I've got to run to see it. No. So when we begin to see things, we begin to see them as they are, and the reality of it, and looking through it and going, okay, can I support this? No. That's what Nagarjuna was doing. He was going, can I support? No, because this and this and this, and because of this. And this because of is what is very, very important. And that goes back to the original Nikayas, where the Buddha is saying, because of this, this appears. And because this appears, then this appears. And he's showing this connection there in terms of it, but saying, we don't even talk about what appeared because now we're dealing with this. But in terms of this, it is a matter of looking and probing into this and looking at the right view. So in the right view, we have to be able to establish what is real, what is not real. Or do we just say what is real and what is not real? Accept that, but accept it from the understanding that it's empty. And that's what Nagarjuna was saying, was he was trying to point the person's head in the right direction and going, don't look at this, look here. Where? I don't see anything. Precisely. But it still matters. But Nagarjuna didn't say that. Nagarjuna left us with an empty Christmas stocking. We looked at it and we went, wow. I pull out sunyata, emptiness, but what can I do with it? What can I do with that? And so there was, because his teachings were misinterpreted in terms of saying that, but he was there presenting it in a way in which it enabled someone to get into the position to be able to transcend. And this transcendence is not the transcendence of an individual. It's not one of these dots here becoming a Buddha. The transcendence is a seeing the Buddha mind in operation, how it works, how vast it is. And so it's not like you're taken somewhere and saying, look here, look how vast this is here. It's not possible. Your head would blow up. It's not conceivable for that to happen. But there is a transcendence. The transcendence is in the letting go of the idea that there is a personality, an ego, or a life and being. And poof, that which is gone. It doesn't mean that there isn't that person here, or ultimately could be enjoying a reward body of the Sambhogakaya, but it's because the realization is the Dharmakaya, the Buddha field. And then the others will take care of themselves. But they are not separate. They are not a thing. In those the Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, and Dharmakaya, they're not separate. That's the issue. They're not separate. This is something that has to be realized, but it has to be realized in the sense of that there has to be some way in which this can happen. And that is the practice. So when we look at the idea of this perfection of transcendent wisdom, we have to see this transcendent. When we say go to the other shore, bodhisattva, the bodhisattva's already is probably telling us, go back, not go this way, go back and help the people. Because this is kind of the way in which some of these things, when we look at it, the transcendence, that's why it says thus come one or thus gone one, because it's saying, hey, tag, you made it. Okay, go back and see what you can do with all of this unharmonious activity within mind. And so we have to see from where is this transcendence. The transcendence is simply the cessation of ignorance. When it's seen in this way, all the sutras, they all talk about this, that in the cessation of ignorance, the Buddha appears. It doesn't say appears to you. So you go, oh, thank you, Buddha, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because then you're still attaching to an appearance. The Diamond Sutra went to great pains to eliminate that kind of an understanding of trying to come to meet the Buddha with his 32 marks. Not going to find him there. I say him But it's, again, it's not a him, her, or it. And that's precisely the point. It is just mind. We use the term mind and we use the term Buddha. And when I talk about mind work, it's really Buddha work. But people would become very confused with that. But if we begin to understand what mind is, it is not, has nothing to do with you thinking. Has nothing to do with that. We just use the term mind in the same way as we talk about the Dharmakaya. It is Dharmakaya work. What we want to do is enable the transcendence. So there's one less dot here that is there to mess up the place. So the Buddha would look at it and say, I don't want to mess up this. This is my house. Why would I throw trash around here? This is the place. But it does this in a functioning way, which is the self-nature of mind. This kind of an understanding, it really kind of transcends the ideas of self. So we have to keep practicing. If you study the sutras, you will see very, very clearly that these kinds of approaches are set out. Whether you're talking about the early Nikayas and sutras to the Mahayana sutras, you'll see that they're set out in this way. And I keep wanting to start my notes because I never really started my notes for this class. But let me go back to them now that we've talked about this perfection of transcendent wisdom, which is beyond or above the range of normal or merely physical human experience. It's existing apart from and not subject to the limitations of the material universe. I shouldn't say it's existing apart from, this quote is a little bit wrong, because it is not existing apart from, it's existing in harmony with all of the appearances within mind. And when we say within mind, it is not within or without, but we understand that it as this kind of a structure versus a structure like this. So it's not this one looking and realizing that this is the mind. It's this looking and thus gone one, thus gone two, thus gone three. This is what a bodhisattva purpose here is to do. And then what happens after that? Very interesting. What happens is now, thus come one, thus come two, thus come three. All of these are bodhisattvas that are now working on the rest. So it's interesting how we look at this and how things go, but it has to transcend the idea of what we perceive to be this reality. So another quote that I wrote down was, the Prajnaparamita refers to the perfected way of seeing the nature of reality. When we say seeing, it's actually what the ancients said, turning the mind's eye inward. So true seeing, not the seeing from the idea of the five skandha. This is the perception of mind. If we're looking at this picture here, and then we say that this one here uses his eye and says, oh, I see this body here. This is not the true seeing. And it will limit that practitioner, because that practitioner is looking for something outside. And so rather than that, then when we see things, it is just that the Dharmakaya is is known. Again, this gnosis or knowing is just from its own self nature. There is no you to get that. Now, as we begin to look at this, okay. Again, what we're talking about, and when we use the Heart Sutra as an example of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, what is there is that there's the Mahayana stress this delivery of sentient beings, and we have talked about the concept of emptiness, but in the very beginning sutras, the idea of these sutras and Mahayana, as it was referred to. Now I'm going to take you way back in time to the proto Mahayana time. Those sutras were stressing practice. They were stressing the perfection of practice. So from the very beginning of the very early sutras, there was an emphasis on dhyana, the emphasis on the perfection of the practice. It is not different now. We still talk about the Eightfold Path, the precepts. We talk about the 37 factors of enlightenment. All of these things are there so that we can practice in the proper way. And that was there from the very beginning of the Mahayana originations. And the term Mahayana in some of the early sutras was not a term to distinguish Mahayana from anything else. The term was used to say that this higher path is the practice that Shakyamuni Buddha practiced. That's how Shakyamuni Buddha did it, was this very strong faith in something. Imagine, he's the one here on earth, and there's no guidelines. He's making it up as he's going. Here we have the benefit of the guidelines from all of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas that have come from before, all of the great masters. We have all these guidelines. He was there working without a net and trying to figure this all out. And he was able to do that. How was he able to do it? Not just simply because he was the Buddha and karmically it was his time. He didn't do it that way. He really worked hard. That's how he did it. If he was there and said, you know what, it's springtime, I think I'll go back to the palace and take a break for a while. And so you see him there, at the palace, just lying down. No, that's not what he did. He worked continuously. That's what Mahayana means. In the very early sutras, Mahayana meant this great effort. In fact, it stressed at that point the Vinayas, the rules of monastics. And so this is a very, very important aspect. Little by little, they're beginning to find out, and they were saying, oh, Mahayana came from here and it was stressing because it wanted to change the rules of the monastics. That's not so. The early sutras were pointing to Mahayana as a perfection of those practices, of the perfection of adhering to the monastic rules. So it's interesting because as we begin to see this, when the historians, they were only looking at this and saying, oh, well, there it is. That was the Arches. This is McDonald's. No, it wasn't McDonald's. It was something, a much greater feast, the feast of practice. And this is where Mahayana and the practice of the paramitas comes from. is because of this. And everything that came after that pretty much echoed all of that. So give me a second here. We're going to switch for a moment to the historical side of this. How did Buddhism come to China? And it was very interesting because during this time period, there was and this is like from about 30 to 30 BC to 200 CE, and there was this Kushan Empire, and the Kushan Empire. Sorry, I'm trying to get this right. You see, this is the bottom of India here, and this Kushan Empire comes all the way up here. And I don't know if you're familiar with maps, and I'm trying to do this and maintain my orientation in terms of this. But you see, it came down very far this way, ultimately into the Indus Valley, but it also moved this way. And we were talking about that one sutra, and that sutra emanated from here. That was the Ajit Sutra. From this point, but all of this was Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the different stands that are there now was in this area, and then approaching over this way, which was Greece. So the Buddhist influence went this way, but the Kushan Empire was one in which, from the Eurasia time, it was it accepted these practices, and even accepted the Jainism, but accepted Buddhism and propagated it throughout that whole empire. In fact, so I don't know if Ajipan is here, but he would probably appreciate this. This is a statue of the Buddha. And if you look at it, you go, well, that doesn't look like a Buddha statue there. That looks a little bit different. And you'd say, yeah, because it is a Buddhist Greco iteration of the Buddha. So from Greece, then, so this is an interpretation of the Buddha way back in time, and depicted in art form. And I know that Ajipan would really know. I'm probably seen this picture 1,000 times, but it was showing this influence of in this Kushan Empire going all the way into this area over here. So very interesting how far it went. There are pictures that of Hercules holding up this tablet like this, and then on the top was just like a Buddha right here, holding up the Buddha, and so you can see the influences and how far it went. But this area here, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kashmir, were really strong supporters of Buddhism in 200 BC, and especially closer to CE, all of this area. And it wasn't until finally, I believe it was the Turkish invaders came in and then kind of changed things a bit. But it gave a very strong influence to and support for Buddhism. Show you another picture. And in this one, you see the Kushan Empire represented in the green, and this is India, and you see it pushing. But from here is something very interesting, because you see the mountain range here and the mountain range there. And in Pakistan right here, something very interesting that was there, which was mulberry trees. Now you go, well, why were mulberry trees very important? Anybody know? What comes out of mulberry trees? Silkworms. So they had a lot of mulberry trees, and because of that, they moved this way towards China. Exactly. Somebody's mentioned, Jasmine Wong said, it's the Silk Road. Exactly. So from here, one of these days I'll be able to, as it moves through these mountain passes and into China. And so as the trade, the Silk Road was there, as a trade, it supported, then the Buddha Dharma came along with it. And it's very interesting because that is when the sutras began to become known to the Chinese and were translated. Some of them, early translations, were like 200 CE. So it's kind of like an echo where the Mahayanas 200 years before, 300 years before, Buddha, 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 Buddha. And then through the Silk Road, all of a sudden you hear Buddha, 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 Buddha. But it's not Buddha, Buddha anymore. It's full. And now it's Chinese. And there is a translation, and there were Indians then that, because of the ability to go through the Silk Road, were able to bring in this kind of a practice. And what did they bring in? It's very interesting, because in this Kushan Empire, this area here was a hotbed of Mahayana. And so logically, they brought Mahayana to the China. And China's going, oh, let me hear this. It's very interesting. To give you an example, was that I remember the first time I went to China, and I was in a taxi, and the people that were there that was going to take us to tour around, they put on a cassette, and it was old rock and roll, like Elvis Presley and all of that, and they absolutely loved it. And I was smiling. I felt bad afterwards. I was smiling because this is rock and roll as they knew it. There was no Eagles or Led Zeppelin or anything. This was what they knew rock and roll to be, because that's what they heard. That's what was copied, and they were given it. So you begin to see, this is very interesting, because we're looking at several hundred years here of the practice. And in order to begin to understand it, we have to see what was happening way back then, and then bringing this forth and to see how it works. And we look at it and we see what was there, but what was happening in China was an echo of what had been happening 100, 200, 400 years before. But it was new music to them. It was new Dharma. And it created an insatiable thirst for Buddha Dharma. Because as it began to come in, they're going, I'm not Indian, but I get it. This is good stuff. I need to get some more. So then there were pilgrims that went there in the first millennium of CE, first 100 years, such as Fa Shen, Xuan Sang, and I Ching, and they pilgrimed to India to get all the stuff. I mean, they were like the first, pirates of bringing this material over into China. They just get as much as they could and boom, bring it back, and they'd bring accounts of what was happening in that time period. And I think it was Fa Shen that was talking about Mahayanas, and say, Mahayanas, there's no difference. They're there with all the other ones. It's just this practice, but they're not like bucking heads and fighting in this way. They might fight in terms of philosophically, but it's all under one roof. In fact, the same thing Shifu used to always emphasize in Nalandia, in this map, it would have been right around here, Nalandia. There was also an influence right around here, and that because of what was happening in the area, the influence went north, and that was of more of the Mahayana that was being presented. This kind of an experience in terms of this was one that little by little the sutras began to take on this Mahayana flavor, all to the chagrin of the Theravadins. But the Theravadins were only one of the groups. Now it's kind of more of a lasting one, but there was many groups, and it really, I studied this, but it's very difficult for me to even begin to talk about the other groups because of the fact that each had a very unique flavor in terms of their approach as to what reality is and what one should practice. But I would say that there was groups like the Prasasangitas, the Santankarikas, the Mahasangitas, and Mahasangitas kind of, as you understand that Maha meaning high, Sangha, Itas practice. So it's the highest Vinaya practice. It was logical that would turn into Mahayana. And so there was a great support for this practice of the heart. And this is where we go with this. Let's see. Well, I think I'll stop there, and I'll take questions before I go to the next part. I try to give you, most importantly, this idea of the Tathagata, because this is important for us to understand that how we practice, that when we sit to meditate and we contemplate, all we do with a contemplation is allow all notions of self to become absorbed by mind. We are not trying to obtain anything. We're just dissolving. This is jumping into the void. When you sit to meditate, you just dissolve. Let it go. Just let it go. And you just keep letting it go until finally it's gone. Thus gone. Tathagata. It is just in this way. And the Tathagata is coming back. Is gone and then you come back. All of that is our practice. It seems very complicated, but when we begin to see it and we break it down to its lowest common denominator, then we understand that this is the way it is. Very interesting, because I was reading about the awakening of the faith of Mahayana, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But they talked about in the very preface of it that it's like a fraction, and we are the numerator. The denominator is mind. We have broken things down, and we believe that the world revolves around us and everything revolves, but we are just a fraction of mind itself. And this is a very interesting way in terms of looking at this. Just kind of a little bit of a teaser. When Paramatha, he so-called translated the awakening of the faith of the Mahayana, scholars now see, because of how he was writing, that it was in fact his own writing, and that he was the one that actually did this. So I think it's Paramartha, I Paramartha, and he and the interpretation of this, where we say awakening of the faith of the Mahayana, is not really in this way. It should say awakening of the faith by Mahayana, not awakening of the faith in Mahayana. It's awakening of the faith by Mahayana. Mahayana representing perfected wisdom, perfected practice. This changes the way in which one would interpret it and look at that, because it is correct, because this is, all these pieces begin to fit together then when we see this. Okay, so I'll leave you there and then take questions.
So you can raise your hand, or you can post a question. And I posted the Gilbert Sunday class chat room, so feel free to copy and paste it in on your calendar.
No questions today. It was all clear.
I think I see. Okay, Michelle's question. This question may be it's kind of long. Michelle, do you want to ask yourself? I'll read it for now. This question may be a bit out of the subject today, yet if you can respond briefly, would be very much appreciated. What do you suggest to introduce Buddha Dharma to young generation aged 25 to 30 who are born in USA? So good in English, but not in Chinese. Are there any class 101 or lectures available which can guide them to have more completed understanding about Buddha wisdom step by step?
It is a difficult age category because it's the age of the video game generation, so it's difficult for us to make inroads with that. But it is a matter of one that we use that imagination to present to them things. And you can use the analogies, of video games and saying, are those real? Are they not real? Do you die? How many times have you died in the game? And you see, it's just the same thing with mind. So if a thought comes to mind, what is it projected on? What we want to do is we want to give them food for thought, not try to go doctrinally and say the 5 precepts are this, the 3 jewels are this. What I find is saying to them, for instance, see an apple in your mind. Can you see it? All right. What is it projected on? Where is it projected on? And so a lot of people go like this, it's in here. Really? So you say, that's where you see the apple. There must be more. So what you're trying to do is allow them to expand out from there. I also have a lot of Chan 101 teachings in my my mind work group that they could access. We've compiled some others from the WeChat one as well. The WeChat ones were more like the beginning simpler ones, the ABCs, and those are little kind of, they can be read within 10 minutes each of them, and but they're quite beneficial to establishing it, because it's directed towards Westerners. And so I think that would be helpful. I don't know if those are accessible or not at this time, but those would be helpful as well. And then you can give them, once they show some interest, you can give them a book. But sometimes when you give a person a book, they just keep it because, it's kind of like proselytizing. They you just go, here's a book, Buddha loves you, and they go, oh, put it away. But you have to stimulate the imagination and their the creativity of their mind in order for them to come close to it. Okay. Any other questions? Mark Wu.
Hi, Gilbert.
Hello.
The last 2 weeks, you introduced lots of these different schools of the Buddhism. But when we, as ordinary people, we have a different opportunity to contact this school. Some of them, they are focused on impermanence on the phenomenon. Some of them, they want to explore the cause and condition. In the meantime, you teach us the mind or to contemplate the mind. There are so many different ways to cut into the Buddha's mind. But somehow, when we touch here, touch there, we sometimes doesn't quite sure what do we want. It seems it's all good, but then we are always stay with the service. So as a master like you, how do we expose ourselves, but then we know what's our route to pick and choose the right path for myself, so I can be progressive in practice the Buddhism. In the meantime, much less than confusion.
Well, I think the right term, Mark, is how do you expose yourself? And to expose yourself is to remove the ignorance, to see that the self itself is not a thing. There's no existence there. Then we have to move beyond that, but we move beyond that via contemplation. Contemplation is a way in which we use and we function off the cushion, contemplating as well as just simply sitting in meditation. But all of what has been presented, all of the manners or methods that I use to present it is supported by the sutras and the treatises of the ancient masters. And the reason I present it is because it works. It worked for me. And I know it's there, and it's actually, although we can get very deep in philosophical things, and you'll see later on, I'll talk about Huayan and Tian Tai schools and how detailed and complicated they are. But ultimately, it's all still pointing to Chan, to beyond words and phrases. And those schools also, in their way, emphasize meditation, but it has to be right view. So my question to you is maintain right view, find out what right view is. And so what you do is you're using the right view to have a direct gnosis or realization of mind. Initially, it's just you're seeing it from the distance. Later on, there's no separation whatsoever. It's infinite, but it's something that cannot be talked about beyond that. It is just something that you have to have the faith that, again, this faith by Mahayana that you are practicing diligently. And so if you work that, irregardless of whether one is a Theravadan practicing the samatha and vipassana, it's the same as sun illumination. All doors will get you there, but the right view is critical. And the right view and the energy that one has to use to practice, it has to be something that you're pushing forward all the time. It's not something that one gets simply by just going to a party and eating a few hors d'oeuvres and then saying, well, the meal didn't taste that good. You hadn't even gotten to the meal yet. So you have to select the path and stay on it and be diligent about it, and then it'll work. It's a good question. Any other questions? No questions? Wow, today maybe I put you guys to sleep.
So Cai Yun had a question. Terry,
On,
unmute
go ahead.
yourself and talk.
Hi, Gilbert.
Hello.
So for myself, my own practice, I feel that I don't read a lot of sutras. Now I understand that you need to have the right view, but I feel, for example, from your teachings, I have the right view. So why it is important to read the sutra, or is it important, and why?
It's very interesting because if you remember last week, I talked about Vaipulya. Vaipulya is that there's major Mahayana sutras. These sutras, they in and of themselves are a complete system of practice. They're a complete system of practice, not because they say the same thing, but they point in the right direction, and they provide you a way of being able to reach the esoteric. And that's the thing. And so we have all of these sutras, and even though they're different, each one of them has the ability to go beyond the words, and that's critical. So they enable you to be able, they give you everything that you need to be able to do that. As you begin to study the sutras, then what happens is that you see the connection between them all, even though they present it in a different way. It's like somebody learning a Latin language, Italian, and they may know a little bit of Portuguese, and they may know a little bit of Spanish. And so they begin to say, oh, they understand a little bit of it. And little later on, they'll understand the basis of all of that is Latin. And so in this way, we're saying that all of these sutras, they have the Latin in them, and they're based in this way. So we begin to practice, but little by little, you can get like bogged down in some of the sutras, and some of them are a bit cumbersome to read, such as Lankavatara Sutra, or they could be long, Avatamsaka Sutra, the Huayan Jing. Those types of sutras are very, very long. So what I suggest is pick chapters and study the chapter. Don't try to start from the beginning to the end, because you'll get lost. But little by little, as you begin to do this, what happens is that you generate an energy that gets stronger and stronger. And so you have an interest in it, and your interest is in the delivering of sentient beings. Shifu used to say, a vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings is the initial generation of the bodhi heart of a bodhisattva. So once we have this kind of a right view, then we begin to say, I study not for myself. I look at this and I'm saying, I'm going to be out of this world. I don't know how long, but I can see the end, more than if I look back to see the beginning. And so for me, just to become this a vessel of knowledge is useless. The only thing I can do is spontaneously share that with others, and that's what you're receiving when you listen to my lectures, is the spontaneity. But that spontaneity comes from the approach of practicing sincerely. So little by little, just kind of up it a little bit, start looking at the different sutras. And you, like I say, don't get bogged down. Just get some sutras and pick some parts out of it and read it and see what it means. Okay, and it'll work for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other?
I'll ask a question. So you talk about dissolving the self, and I just heard that when someone's using Huatou, and then they, like Shifu said, the ground dropped and the empty space shattered. And then how does dissolving the self relate or to relate to those kind of phrases? How do they come, like, how does that, I guess they all describe the same thing, but how does that relate to one another?
The idea of dissolving the self is right view, that we start with an intellectual understanding that the self is not supportable. And as we begin to examine it, we convert that examination from an intellectual exercise into contemplation. And this is where Nagarjuna came and presented this essentially a negation of all phenomena. Everything that's on that side was negated, and so people said, well, he didn't go any further beyond it. But what he did was then say, what then? And so that what then is the contemplation. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not. Was there another part of it that I missed?
This question was, I had this question because I heard someone said that like using silent illumination is like they dissolve the self at the end, and then but like a Huatou practitioner, when they get enlightened, it's more like the empty space is shattered. But I mean, from the right view, I feel that at the end, all methods will lead in like the self to be dissolved. And so I just want to ask if the statement was correct, and or if there. So one, dissolving the self is more like the inner, like that I understand, and then talking about shattering empty space is sort of describing the phenomenon side. So there's no contradiction. I just don't know if there's actually difference, you know, in two way, like the silent illumination and the Huatou.
It actually, now I understand your question. I'm sorry. You were right that they end up in the same place. They just approach it from a little bit different ways. One of them is like a plane softly landing, and the other one is just simply the plane just crashing. They both reach the same place, but they reach them in a little bit different way. But the issue is that even using the Huatou can at some point be the same as silent illumination. It brings the mind to the stability of just simply the contemplation of the present moment. So after one may have some kind of a very strong experience, which I would say 95% of those are fabricated, then there you can use the Huatou almost like mocha, like silent illumination. So you could say, you know, who is reciting the Buddha's name? Later on, all you need is just who, and you're there, because it's just a reminder to keep the mind stabilized. So you don't even have to use the Huatou in this way, because you're at the Huatou is resolved. So it's just a reminder to maintain the contemplation. So you're right in that way. The Huatou, oftentimes it does take a lot of energy, and the problem with that is that the ego wants to get something for all that energy. You know, it's like somebody climbing up to a viewpoint, and they get close to it, but they look out and they can't see anything. It's just still fog around there, and they're going, I wasted all my time. You know, there's nothing here. Precisely, there's nothing here. But they don't see it. They can't see it because they have the mind of attachment. And so it becomes very, very difficult to do that. When you use the Huatou in the right way, you're constantly going to the contemplation. Who, or what? And when we use it in this way, it's used in the right way. Then we don't have to worry. If you're sitting there and you think, I'm at the top of the mountain, no, it's not going to be that way. The shattering, it can happen But too much is made up of that drama of this shattering of the great doubt. It can be that way, but even that shattering can happen off the cushion. It can be in any moment if you're there and the conditions are right. And then boom, just like the nun that was walking with the bucket on a moonlit night, and she looked down and the moon was in the water, and then all of a sudden the bucket bottom fell out. Foof. Just like that, it happens. What they call a snap of the finger, but that can happen also in silent illumination. But it is, let's say, less dramatic, but more authentic, except for if one just simply lulls the mind into a dead state. So all of these show that you do need a well-known advisor to help you so that you don't get stuck in these kinds of mind contrivances and say, oh, I was having, and then everything disappeared. And you said, what? Because then you started holding your breath, you passed out, or whatever it was. But so the methods will work, but we've got to be true to the methods. Either one of them will work. Huatou will work. Mocha, silent illumination, they all work. But it is the right view that is the essence, right view, and the virya, the energy to stay with it. Okay.
Thank you.
There was, I think, one last question. No question. Okay.
I
All
think
right.
yeah.
No? Okay. Oh, Mei Fang.
Okay. Yeah, Mei Fang, please go ahead.
You have to mute yourself.
Sorry, I was talking mute.
Yeah.
Hello, Gilbert.
Hello.
I have this question that it's more like a daily practice. I notice a lot of time when we deal with the relationship with family, friends, colleagues, a lot of time, sometimes when we get into like difficult relationship, it's not because we don't have good intention, but it's more about like the way we present ourselves, we express ourselves. And so I notice when you have good interpersonal skill sets, usually you get along well with people better, right? But I also saw like some people that go to extreme, like like when they are really good at talking, really good at like uh assuming what the other person are thinking, and they kind of like they even go to like manipulation to maximum their personal profits. And so I have been thinking that I should probably practice more on my interpersonal skill sets so that I can have a better relationship with people, family, friends, colleagues. But sometimes I feel like when I practice those skill sets, it's a little bit making me into now a sincere person, like like trying to target on certain topics that the person might be interested in and try to please them. And um I I just know I just know like probably like for the right view or the right thoughts, I know like I'm not trying to maximize my personal profits, but what kind of right view say like when I interact with my employer, and how can I have a better relationship, but at the same time it's not like I'm trying to manipulate and I can still have like being my true true mind, being sincere.
Yeah,
That's my question.
I
you.
understand your question. It's very interesting. Shifu, he would tell us, he goes, actually, I don't like to talk. And people would say, well, Shifu, you talk all the time. And he said, because you ask me questions, of course I have to talk. And then he, it reminded me of one little story where the young monk asked the master, Master, what is Chan? And he said, ask me a question. It is in this way that we engage with function. So whenever we engage in function, we don't worry about that. We have patience. So sometimes I get questions that are very detailed. Most of the questions here, are sincere questions. So I take the time to do them. It is not my time. It is just Chan time. This is the time. So you don't define anything and saying, this person, they're so boring, but I have to engage and talk to them. And you're just going, because you don't do, you just understand. And then you use your harmony to be able to if it, let's say it's gossip, then you have nothing to do with it. If it's something that you need to know, fine. If they want to share an experience, you understand. It is Chan time, not your time. So you understand, and this is how you engage with people. And little by little, you can respond to what they say, but you don't have to keep going if the dialogue is absolutely useless, and you turn it in a different way. But we don't use discrimination in our practice. What we do is we use the practice of the heart. And when we do this, we understand the more that I show interest in this person's life, the more that I will harmonize with them, and the more they will harmonize with me, because that's what you want to do. You want to be the tuning fork where you go boom, and the person here, you touch them, boom, and they tune. So they're tuning to Chan. You're not tuning to ignorance, but you still have to be in that position where you communicate with them. In order to help them, you have to do that. So you just use your sincerity of your practice and put aside the idea, this is my time. I don't like what this person is saying, or they're wasting my time. So this troubles me. That comes from within you, not from the other person. That belongs to you. So this is where you have to root this out from your own practice, and then just simply are navigating within the world. If you're navigating within the world with Prajnaparamita, then you see everything is ultimately empty. That was Avalokiteshvara, coursing through the deep Prajnaparamita. The deep Prajnaparamita was not some place. It's just in the present moment. Wherever you see, then you use the sincerity of the practice, okay?
Thank you, Gilbert. I think you said a key word, harmony. That's one thing I'm trying to pursue. I try to have a good karma with all the people I know this life. And thank you so much for your awesome answers.
Thank you.
I
The
will try to
harmony,
follow.
the harmony comes from the Chan, the practice, the sincerity. And so the more that we realize how mind works, the more we'll realize how mind works. I mean, it's just something very interesting. You have to put the effort into it. And if you do, it will work. And so you listen to it, and these are good words. But remember what I said about the Buddha. You have to walk to that village to get there. You just simply can't get instructions on how to do that. So thank you for your sincerity. Okay.
Thank you, Gilbert.
One last question, or else we're finished.
Is there any more question?
Okay, well then we'll finish. This is something that I could present this material in 1,000 ways. So what I'm trying to do is present it to you in a way in which it might benefit in this moment. And so that's why I changed it with the diagrams in the very beginning of the class to give you an idea of what you're practicing. Hopefully that will help you. Hopefully you'll begin to understand a little bit more of the Buddha, the idea of Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakaya, and understand that we're really looking at the Buddha field. The Buddha field is every moment. It's here right now. We just have to tune into it through our own harmony. So instead of just using the harmony with sentient beings, we make the harmony from the Buddha mind, and then it will. There's no doubt it will come to pass. Okay. So I will see you next week.
Everyone, please join Pong. Bow.
Amitopo.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Gilbert.
Thank you all.
Amitopo.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Gilbert.
Gilbert.
You're all welcome. Come back next week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Come back tomorrow. Tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow. Be well, everyone. Thank you. Tomorrow practice.
Tomorrow Dharma talk.